but they have these things that they're planning 30 and 40, 50 years ahead. They have these foundations and these think tanks that are all financed by tax-free money, and they continue to plot against the people. It's not only in America, it's worldwide.
It's worldwide, but you can see the hot spots of where they have their focus by when you see huge financial bubbles and huge pumping in of unlimited credit and currency, creating this artificially manufactured bubble. You can see their evil designs at work, and you can know what's coming.
That's right, but you have to know what to look for, and you have to put what I call a mosaic together. And that mosaic includes business, finance, economics, and all of those issues peripheral.
All right, hold on. Bob Chapman with us. TheInternationalForecaster.com is his website. We're talking about finances. We can take your calls as well at 1-800-313-9443. Back in a flash with Bob Chapman, Sam and Kurt live for Liberty Roundtable Radio. Back with you live, Bob Chapman, TheInternationalForecaster.com with us. We're talking about his latest international forecaster where he talks about, hey, they use fiat money to manipulate and create bubbles and crashes as they control nations and use nations as a theater for operations to promote a one-world government. The Illuminati thugs are dangerous and evil, and they're using the United States and Israel concurrently right now for their agenda. And then you go on and ask a ton of incredibly insightful questions, Bob, about why did we engage ourselves in World War I? Why did Roosevelt in World War II allow these things to happen in terms of, hey, letting the Japanese attack? Why did we do this? That you go through the whole thing, go through history and say, you know what, their evil design is, one, use fiat currency to manipulate everything, and then use war to consolidate and control and bring us out of the, quote, economic doldrums they created in the first place. But then you go on and talk about Israel. And, hey, they wanted Israel. They used it to get a foothold in the Middle East. It's been manipulated. They want Israel to be big enough to be powerful to cause problems and continue the conflict. But they don't want Israel to get too big because then, hey, they won't have control of it. It goes on and on and on. But they're using Israel right now as their trump card to just keep things hot and keep a ton of wars at possible eruption at any moment.
Well, that's true. And some of the things that I didn't put in there was that how does one explain where all the loot went to that Germany had at the end of the war, and how so many of these people who were involved at the higher levels in particular managed to get away or managed to be hired by the United States government. A number of them were. Thousands. And on the other hand, there's a book that captures this. It's called Gold Warriors.
Gold Warriors?
Gold Warriors by Sterling Seagraves.
Sterling Seagraves, okay.
And it explains, and you have to back into this, but I think Japan deliberately started the war because the United States asked them to. Now, I can't prove that, but if you back into this thing and you see what happened after the war, all of the loot that was captured by the Japanese throughout Asia,
they kept,
and they were split it. Half went to the U.S. government, actually to the OSS-CIA, and the remainder remained with the Japanese. And the Japanese, in 1952, were producing as much as they were in the late 1930s. And the same people were in charge that were in charge of the war.
And then it was set up for us to buy it all after they started producing it, too, by defunking American factories, right?
Yes, and opening up our markets to Japanese goods.
Yeah, when you see the picture, it's all intentional and all falls into a pattern. And that's why when Bob says you got to kind of back into this, he's right. You can't prove that. However, you can prove there was cooperation and foreknowledge, though, right?
Yes, but in the Philippines, the Japanese hid all of their treasures. And over the years, these treasures have been unearthed, and most of them, I would assume, have been, if not all of them, have been unearthed by now. And that's what they split up. And the U.S. government controls Japan, and there's just no two ways about it. And indirectly, they do Germany as well. And that's an outgrowth of what happened at the end of the Second World War. That was their design for future years to keep these illuminists in power.
And this is what makes the Russians and the Chinese so angry, because of the hegemony where we control everybody else almost, and they get mad about it, thus creating more and more blowback, right?
That's right. Well, we were the ones who originally, in China, financed both sides. And Chiang Kai-shek, who was the more conservative of the two, he was unsuccessful. And one of the reasons why was they did the same thing there that they did in Eastern Europe during the uprising in 1956, is they sent them weapons with the wrong ammunition or faulty ammunition. And Mao Zedong won, and China became communist. But we planned that whole thing. We trained Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam.
As we continue to fund both sides of wars and arm people and get in conflicts, we're one of the biggest arms dealers in the world. It continues on and on and on. It's beyond imagination. How about this fight between Israel and Palestine right now, then? Are we involved in both sides of it? We probably are, right?
Oh, absolutely. And it's a backdoor way of getting into World War III when they need it. And they'll need it just before this whole financial and economic situation is going to come apart. And this is leading up to that, and that'll engulf the entire Middle East and Asia, if not even China. But it'll certainly involve India and Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, and then Syria, Lebanon, and Palestine. One of the things that when I was in counterintelligence back in the 1950s, this is the kind of thing that I learned. And
Hold
I
on,
said to
let's get the
myself,
details in seconds. I don't want to cut you off. I want to give you a long segment where you can explain it in detail. So when he was back in counterintelligence, he learned some details that you're going to hear in seconds. 800-313-9443, Bob Chapman, the internationalforecaster.com, on your radio live. TheInternationalForecaster.com. Bob Chapman is with us, ladies and gentlemen. TheInternationalForecaster.com, an incredible newsletter, ladies and gentlemen. Sign up today if you want financial reality news every week in your inbox. It's fantastic. Actually, it comes out twice a week if you're on the internet version. TheInternationalForecaster.com. So, Bob Chapman, you were saying when you were in early counterintelligence in the 50s, you learned some valuable information.
Right. And we found out that the Japanese diplomatic code had been broken in 1937 by the British, which the British shared with the United States. And so we knew everything that the Japanese were doing. And, of course, what the public didn't know is that we had that kind of access. The Japanese knew, but the Japanese had two-pronged diplomatic corps, one of which worked subliminally directly with the U.S. government, the other was for show purposes, if you may. And that's how they arranged to get us in the war, because nobody was getting out of depression. And we had previously arranged for the financing of Krupp and other major countries and companies in Germany like IG Farben, etc. But the very fact that we had done that, and I discovered that early on, I began to say to myself, gee, that's not the way we were told, and we've been lied to. And then I ran into all kinds of other things in the transmission of information. We'd break a code that the Russians were using, and we had a landline that we sent it on so it couldn't be tapped into, because if it was, we'd know right away. and it went directly by courier in those days to Washington, to NSA, and the value of that information, would be graded. The problem was it arrived at the same time in Moscow. And so I said to myself, hey, there's something really bad going on here. And then I found out that Washington was just loaded with spies, well within the government, and we didn't have the kind of security that Americans thought we had. And of course, the same was true in Europe.